I'm going to make an effort here to make a concise video on the topic of the occult philosophy and its relationship to the birth of modern science. Firstly, a curious fact is that Isaac Newton, the forefather of modern physics, was deeply interested in a current of philosophical thought called the Hermetica. And the Hermetica traditionally is attributed to the ancient Egyptian sage Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great Hermes, who was thought to be a contemporary of Moses, the giver of the Torah, the law of the Hebrews, the Israelites. But the Hermetic principle is that as above, so below. Okay. And what I wanted to focus on particularly was a were two perspectives. And one of those perspectives is flat Earth. The other perspective is heliocentrism. Now, what I'd like to say for flat Earth is that it has a truth to it. If we look through our eyes, what we see is that in the heavens, the fire or the sun moves through the sky. It rises in the morning, goes to midday, sets in the evening. And what we see is that during that process, the Earth remains fixed. So the fire in the sky is mutable, it's changing, and the Earth is fixed. And this actually gets to another sort of intuition related to um, that astrological perception, which is the alchemical perception between the elements of earth and fire. Earth is what happens when is the opposite of fire, we could think, and it has a centripetal quality. Um, and what that means is falling into the center. So when we go to sleep, we lay down horizontally. Firstly, even that idea is curious because the horizon is Earth. Earth is what we see when we look over the horizon, like in a horizontal way, whereas heaven is vertical. It's what we see when we look up. But like there's something kind of curious is that humans are vertical. We are, you could say, the only vertical creature, the most vertical creature. This is one of the curiosities that defines the Homo sapiens as a species. I mean, I sometimes think of a giraffe in this. Can giraffe look up? I mean, I don't know if it can, or maybe it can, but I don't know if it does, you know. But that gets into the thing of like difference between humans and animals, and we should talk about that in another video perhaps. But like my point is that regardless, like humans are very vertical, and G.K. Chesterton pointed this out in The Everlasting Man. I've gone off on a tangent there. I need to return. So when we fall asleep at night, it's a centripetal force. It's like falling into the earth. It's like because we succumb to the gravitation of the earth. We slumber down like that. The opposite process of that is connected to consciousness. And like what I mean is that we are diurnal creatures and we wake with the sun, ideally, and go to sleep with the sun, ideally. I'm not like making like a moral thing out of that, but like, it's what's it called? The circadian rhythm. It's a healthy thing to do, you know. We yeah, don't always do that. I certainly don't. But the point is that actually the idea of waking up is a centrifugal force. These are geometric terms I'm using is like centripetal is like falling into the center and centrifugal is going out from the center. So this is a really helpful way of thinking about the alchemical notions of fire and earth. Earth is heavy gravitational, and fire is like expansive and centrifugal. And indeed, like modern physics, when it describes bodies, like bodies of mass, like they're sort of like characterized by like the bigger ones have a greater gravitational field. So there's a really interesting connection, but even like etymologically, gravitation and gravity and gravitas, all and grave actually all have this idea of like a V, like going down into the earth. Whereas the other shape is like I'm doing doing like Illuminati signs now. But the other shape is like the upward triangle, which is the sign of fire. I'm just pointing these out because like in alchemy, in medieval alchemy, that's how you just signify fire and earth. I'm pretty sure I'm correct on that. Because yeah, I think it is because it's like fire is just like a triangle pointing up. Earth is a triangle pointing down. Gravitas, gravity, and levity, I guess you could say, is the opposite process, or lightness. That's really curious too, actually, even in our language, right? Because like the idea of like light in the heavens, like literal light, but also like lightness. And if you're using those words equivocally, you would like, be confusing the meanings between those. But they actually kind of are similar because like even like a bird is light as a feather. Lightness is connected to where the light is. The birds are the only creatures that are light enough to get to the light, closest to the light. There are no other creatures other than birds, that are near the light, and it's because they are light. If you see what I mean. Anyway, so yeah, that's all to say that you can see how in the English language, and I think this just goes back to the Proto-Indo-European roots of the English language, as with Persian, as with the ancient Sanskrit or Vedic languages, as with Celtic, as with Germanic. There's this interesting and curious legacy of meaning, which sort of is in the language and is particularly in this occult philosophy. There was another thought I wanted to share, which is just to say, right, yeah, so like the flat earthers have their intuition, have something that like seems quite plausible to look at things that way. But that was challenged by a scientific theory. But a theory, etymologically, in the Greek, comes from theoria, seeing, but it's not seeing with the physical, corporeal eyes, actually, because the flat earther has an empirical experience that I described, that the earth is flat, horizontal, and it's not, it denies the sphericity of the earth, but the, I mean, it's a slightly separate debate, the whole flat earth thing, but like, it's for sure related because heliocentrism was scandalous to the imagination of the Middle Ages and the early modern people, uh, because of how intuitive flat Earth is, actually. So it's very counterintuitive. But the interesting thing about art and the shapes art debates these days is like it's counterintuitive, sure, but it's like it's so embedded in our knowledge and our education and our like what we teach about science that it's like you know dogma basically. It's something we accept, and I'm not questioning heliocentrism. I think it's true, but I'm just saying that there are different perspectives. Now, to embrace heliocentrism, what you want to say is that there's a central fire, and there were ideas in Pythagoreanism and the Hermetic tradition about a central fire, and that's an outlook, that's a worldview that differs from the view that Earth is flat. Heliocentrism is challenging the Ptolemaic orthodoxy that was inherited via Aristotle, um, or via the Aristotelian Ptolemaic synthesis. I'm just saying, like, symbolically, when you wake up with the sun, your energy expands, it's a centrifugal, that's fire-like. And when you go to sleep, it's centripetal, it gets heavy, you succumb to gravity. That's just a natural rhythm of human life, like earth and fire. Don't like have to call it those names, but like those names, like that's what that means in the occult philosophy. And it makes a lot of intuitive sense to me. Actually, both perspectives make a lot of intuitive sense to me. But you would embrace heliocentrism if you thought that fire was in some way superior to the earth. If you think of it in terms of the view of natural philosophy, which was the way people saw nature prior to what became modern science as we understand it. But modern science is extremely powerful, and methodologically, it takes the Earth perspective of what the eyes, the ears, the phenomena, the empirical phenomena we have, the data we have, and it says, and it studies that, it attends to that. But it cannot say that that's metaphysically, that's what there is, that's all there is, because that data requires interpretation. The flat earther and the heliocentrist are in a dispute about their theory. And theory, I'm pointing to the third eye, to ajna, to the third eye, because it's intuitive, incorporeal perception. We're not perceiving with these physical eyes we have. It's an analogy, obviously, but it's an analogy that's real and taken seriously if you oppose metaphysical naturalism. And the point about this is that um, science can methodologically deploy empiricism and should, and that is extraordinarily powerful, and I'm incredibly grateful for it doing that. But to say metaphysically that there is nothing other than that, the Platonist says there is, of course, something other than that. That is, of course, enfolded in a theoria or a noetic realm, an intelligible realm, because the theory of universal gravitation, for example, is a way of seeing myriad data. It's a way of unifying it under an intelligible manifold, a noetic manifold. So that's Platonic, the very basis of modern science, the very basis of the basis of modern science. If we're making a claim to real knowledge there, we're making a claim about how the empirical manifold is unified and in what way. And then metaphysically, as Proclus, the successor, the Platonic successor, notes at the beginning of his Elements, then it's just about ultimate unity. What is the metaphysics of ultimate unity? If we acknowledge intelligible unities in our theories and the importance of those, then is there a unity of unities? Is there a theory of theories? Now, of course, STEM, modern STEM, modern secular STEM is in a crisis because it's so epistemically fragmented because of an underlying metaphysical naturalism, which is rejecting in a nominalist sense anything metaphysically higher than the empirical manifold. That would be metaphysical naturalism. But yeah, sometimes counterintuitive things are true, but to see that heliocentrism is true, we need to use our imagination or our intuition at some level to say, okay, that's fascinating. It appears this way to me phenomenologically in my experience. And so I can look to ancient people who see it this way, modern people who see it this way, and go, yeah, guys, like that makes a lot of sense to see it that way. But hold on, maybe, that thing in the sky has a great gravitational field. Maybe it's a massive body in the sky. And maybe we are absorbed, we are caught up in the gravitational field as are the seven heavens. And that's a big change in perspective from the Ptolemaic synthesis, which held Earth to be fixed and fire to be mutable and the horizon of the Earth being all there is. And again, that makes a very deep, intuitive sense because the heavens are up there, like vertically, but Earth is this way, that way, you know, the four directions in the Kabbalah, like, they there's the view that like create it's in the Kabbalah and it's also in the patristic Christian writings is the hexameron or the creation in 6 days, 6 days of time. The Lord made all things, but 6 degrees of space too, because you've got north, east, south, west, and then you've got like up and down, and those are like the six cardinal directions in a sense. But the four are like the horizon, and then heaven and hell, maybe you could say, as the vertical sort of intercession of the horizon. Um, so modern science, or at least the Copernican turn, is a revolution in the human imagination first, and it's a counterintuitive one, but one that we can find persuasive because we can say that empirically all this data makes sense if we see it that way. If we see it that way in terms of a theory, then it makes sense. But we need to admit the Platonic premise that there is an intelligible order, a noetic order that is non-empirical to make sense of what we found empirically. So thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the video, um, yeah, like leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe would be great. Um, yeah, I'd love to grow the channel, really enjoy making this content. And I wonder what you think. Thanks for listening.